Hi, this is Matt at LSAT Lab, and today's lesson is on science passages in the reading comprehension section. And there are 24% of all passages in reading comprehension. So about 1 in 4 passages are going to be related to science. And it's a challenging topic. A lot of folks struggle with science passages because of the language and the terminology and some of the complexity of these passages, in that they give you a lot of details, lots of information to hold on to. Really tempting to try to hold on to it all. Not a good idea to do so, though. So in today's lesson, we want to cover the common subjects of science passages, and we want to practice applying the RC process to a science passage. And at the end, we'll review the trap answers that you really want to be looking out for when working on reading comp. The subjects that are common to science passages are those related to biology, chemistry, physics, astronomy, essentially all the natural or hard sciences that are pretty common in any academic environment. The process that you want to use to approach reading comp in general, remember, it's a 4-step process. First, you want to make sure that you're actively reading the passage, which means that you're connecting to the passage in a personal way, that you're making the information that you're reading something that you can relate to. Maybe it's a topic that you recently read something about, or maybe a family member went through a certain experience. But if there's any way in which you can connect personally to that information, it will increase your retention and your comprehension of that information. You also want to make sure that you're anticipating as you go, because if you're anticipating what's likely to come next, that means that you're thinking about the passage from an overarching purpose perspective, meaning what's the purpose of that last paragraph that I just read, and what would make sense for the next paragraph to try to accomplish. So let's practice that on a passage. Go ahead and pause the lesson, read through this passage, see if you can find what's the main point. When you're ready, hit play again, and we'll review it together. Okay, so the first step, right, is to find that main point. And in this passage, it's placed fairly early on with that pivot, that word but a new DNA study has revealed the relationship of lichen-forming fungi to several previously known branches of the fungus family tree. So we have this new DNA study, and it's given us some new information that we didn't have before. Now, the next step is to make sure that we understand what are the other parts of the passage doing in service of that main point. So what's the passage map look like? And in this case, well, we have the main point in that first paragraph. In the next paragraph, we have the challenge that was facing researchers in trying to get to that information. So there was something that was blocking those researchers, and they describe that in the second paragraph. And then they go on in the end of the second paragraph to discuss how that challenge was overcome. And they love to provide a challenge and then a solution to that challenge in many, many passages. And then the final paragraph, they give you this tip at the very, very beginning. It says one implication of the new research. And so they're giving you an implication of the study that was discussed throughout this passage. Okay, so now that we have a passage map and we understand what the different parts of the passage are trying to accomplish, we're ready for the questions. Okay, so here's the first question. It's a main point question. Try this one on your own. Hit play again when you're ready to review, and we'll look at it together. All right, welcome back. So we're on a main point question. The best thing to do when you're on a main point question is, before you look at the answer choices, go back and look at what the main point of the passage is. Anchor yourself on that text, and it will make reading through these choices a lot easier. So answer choice A says that new research suggests that fungi are not only parasitic, but also symbiotic. Now, they talked about lichens being in a symbiotic relationship with algae. So to say that they're not only parasitic, but also symbiotic, we actually knew this from before. This is not new research. This answer choice is actually contradicted by the passage. Answer choice B says that new research has revealed that lichen-forming fungi constitute a distinct species of fungus. Well, the passage actually said that they were already a distinct species. Like, this isn't new research that has revealed this particular characteristic. The new research gave us insight into something else, but not into whether they're a distinct species of fungus. That's actually contradicted by the passage. Answer choice C says that new research into the evolutionary origins of lichen-forming fungi reveals them to be closely related to various species of algae. To say that they're closely related to the species of algae, that's their host. This is actually not being presented in the passage. This is contradicted by the passage because they're their own species, and they're not connected to the algae. They're connected to the other branches in the fungus family tree. Answer choice D says that new research has isolated the DNA of lichen-forming fungi and uncovered their relationship to the fungus family tree. That looks okay. Let's hold on to answer choice D just in case. It kind of sounds like it's coming from what we identified as the main point. Answer choice E says that new research into the fungal component of lichens explains the visible similarities between lichens and fungi being means of their common evolutionary origins. And if you read just a little bit past lines 6 and 9, this is something that was stated within the passage, but it's not the main idea. So we would call this simply too narrow. This is true, but not the main idea of the passage. And that leaves us with answer choice D, which best paraphrases the statement in the passage that we identified as the author's main point. So the next question is a purpose question. So this question asks, which one of the following most accurately describes the author's purpose in the last paragraph of the passage? And so if you're on a question that's like this and is asking you for the purpose of a paragraph, you probably want to go back and revisit the passage map. So the last paragraph is all about discussing an implication of new research or of the new research that overturns a long-standing assumption that parasitic interactions inevitably evolve over time to greater benignity and eventually to symbiosis. Right? So it's overturning this assumption that was previously held. So we're looking for an answer that basically says to discuss an implication that overturns a long-standing assumption, roughly. And so let's look at the choices. Go ahead and try this one on your own. See if you find an answer that you like, and then we'll review it together afterwards. All right, so welcome back. Answer choice A says to suggest that new research overturns the assumption, so far so good, that lichen-forming fungi are primarily symbiotic. Well, this is a little bit too specific about lichen-forming fungi than being primarily symbiotic rather than parasitic. This is close, but it's simply presenting it in a slightly different way. The assumption is wrong here in answer choice A. The assumption isn't that lichen-forming fungi are primarily symbiotic, but rather, if we go back and look at the beginning of that last paragraph, it's the assumption that parasitic interactions inevitably evolve over time to greater benignity. So that's the assumption. Answer choice A gets the assumption wrong. It's contradicting the passage. Let's look at answer choice B. To show that findings based on new research regarding fungus classification have implications that affect the long-standing assumption of evolutionary science. Notice that this answer choice doesn't describe that assumption like answer choice A does. Answer choice A names what the assumption is, and that's how it gets itself into trouble. But answer choice B just basically says it overturns a long-standing assumption without saying what that assumption is, and that's actually a good characteristic. By not saying too much, it doesn't go off the rails and gets itself into trouble by saying something that isn't necessarily true. So let's hold on to answer choice B. Answer choice C says to explain the fundamental purposes of fungus classification in order to position this classification within the broader field of evolutionary science. Well, this doesn't say anything about undermining a long-standing assumption. This simply has the wrong role. Let's get rid of C. D says to demonstrate that a fundamental assumption of evolutionary science is verified by new research. This is actually contradicted. It's not that the assumption has been verified, it's that it's been undermined. So let's get rid of D. Answer choice E says to explain how symbiotic relationships can evolve into purely parasitic ones. While it does do that, that's not the purpose of this paragraph. If you're on a question like this and you get torn between an answer like B and like E, you want to maybe ask yourself, is one of these describing what it is while the other one is describing why it's there? So while they do E, that's not why they're there, right? They're there in order to show how this research undermines a long-standing assumption. And in the process, maybe they explain how symbiotic relationships can evolve into purely parasitic ones, and then maybe back again. So that's got the wrong role. Let's get rid of E, and that leaves us with answer choice B as the right answer. So the final question here for today's lesson, this is an organization of the passage. It's a good question to go back and review the passage map for. Remember, we've got the main point, then we've got a challenge of researching lichens, and then we have how the challenge was overcome, and then an implication of the new research that overturns the long-standing assumption. So we're essentially looking for those different parts in the right answer here. Go ahead and give this one a try on your own, and when you think you have an answer that you like, hit play again, come back and we'll review it together. Okay, welcome back. So answer choice A says that an explanation of the difficulty of classifying lichens, which we do get, not till the second paragraph, but that's true. We do get an explanation of the difficulty of classifying lichens. Description of the DNA sequence of lichen-forming fungi. I don't think we actually got a description of the DNA sequence. So that seems off. And then a summary of the implications. Answer choice A is pretty good, except for that second part. That second claim has the wrong role. So let's get rid of it. Answer choice B says, definition of lichens. Okay, we do get a discussion of lichens. Discussion of new discoveries concerning lichens' evolutionary history. We got that in the second paragraph. Application of these findings in support of an evolutionary theory. Well, I don't necessarily know if we got an evolutionary theory. So that third role seems to be off a little bit. Let's get rid of answer choice B. Answer choice C says definition of lichens. Okay, sure. Discussion of the difficulty in classifying their fungal components. We got that in the second paragraph. Resolution of this difficulty. Great. That's the end of the second paragraph. And then implications of the resulting research. This has all of the pieces that we're looking for. Let's hold on to answer choice C. Answer choice D says discussion of the symbiotic relationship that constitutes lichens. We do get that discussion. I'm not sure, but okay, let's hold on so far. So discussion of how new research can distinguish parasitic from symbiotic fungi and implications of this research. Well, we do have an implication of the research. I'm not sure that we get a discussion of how new research can distinguish parasitic from symbiotic fungi, but rather how the new research can distinguish between lichens and their host, the algae. So that second rule is wrong. Let's get rid of it. Answer choice E, explanation of the symbiotic nature of lichens. We do get a little bit of a discussion of that. Discussion of the problems this poses for genetic researchers. Okay, we also get that a little bit. And then delineation of the implications of these problems. It's not the problems that are providing implications. It's the new research that's providing the implications. So answer choice E has the third rule is wrong. So let's go ahead and get rid of E. And that leaves us with answer choice C as the right answer. So now let's take a look at the traps that we're seeing come up as we're working through these wrong answers. It's really important to get into the habit of trying to label the wrong answers with specific reasons that are general that you can apply from one question to the next question to the next, so that you can start to look for these patterns emerge. And the patterns that you really want to be looking out for, the trap answer patterns that you want to be looking out for when you're working on reading comprehension are from top right, contradiction. 25% of wrong answers are wrong because they're simply contradicting the passage. 18% of wrong answers are wrong because they're out of scope. 14% are wrong because they're unsupported, meaning that they have the right terms, but they're presenting them in a way that has a slightly different meaning than what was presented in the passage. On the other side, at the bottom left, too strong is about 14% as well. So answer choices that go beyond what you know based off of the information in the passage. Unsupported relationships are about 5%, meaning it's a specific type of unsupported. Unsupported where they're building this connection between two things in a way that hasn't been supported in the passage. Wrong purpose is about 5%, meaning that they're describing the wrong purpose of a claim. Unsupported comparison, it's again another specific form of unsupported, but they're building a comparison between two ideas, and that comparison is not substantiated in the passage. Answer choices that are too narrow. This is for main point questions. About 4% of wrong answers are wrong because they're simply, while they're saying something that is true, they're not saying the main point of the passage. Some answer choices are wrong because they're actually supported. This would be like each of the following was mentioned in the passage except. Answer choices that are too weak. If you're on a strengthen or on a weaken question, it's possible that an answer choice could be wrong because it's simply not strong enough to have an impact to strengthen or weaken the argument that's being presented in the passage. And then about 2% of answer choices are wrong because they're simply describing the wrong role. So these are a summary of the trap answers that you really want to be aware of. And when you're working on RC, it's not just about making sure that you can find where the right answer comes from in the passage. You do want to, as much as possible, get into the habit of jotting down the lines that prove your choice. But you also want to get into the habit of jotting down the type of incorrectness that the answer choice possesses. And maybe it's more than one sometimes, so that you can get into the habit of recognizing those generalized patterns. It will help you on test day when you're stuck between two choices, make that last elimination more quickly. So in summary, remember to actively read the passage, which means to connect personally to the information, or at least try to anticipate where the passage is going to go so that you can stay focused on the big overarching trajectory of the passage. Make sure that you identify the main point when you get done reading it. Understand how each of the parts of the passage relates back in service of that main point, and then go take a look at the questions. The subjects that are common to the science topic in RC are biology, chemistry, physics, astronomy, your standard natural sciences. The important trap answers, the ones that are the most prominent, answer choices that contradict the passage, answer choices that are simply out of scope, answer choices that are unsupported and that they bring up topics or terms from within the passage, but present them in a way that imbues a different meaning than what was there in the passage. And then answer choices that are simply stated in a way that is stronger than what can be supported by the information. So that's it for today's lesson on science passages. I invite you to check out some of these other lessons or visit us today at lsatlab.com.